That man should be a leader on the team, not this guy out here being a freaking complete crybaby. Give me a break.
Did you see those moves he was making as a rusher?
We have like 4,000 running back ones this year.
Don't look now, but the Ravens and, yes, even the Russell Wilson-led Steelers, both doing really good things on offense this year.
So I do think this is a spot where we could see Nick Chubb come out, get 70, 80 total yards, but punch in a touchdown.
Starting to look a lot like that tight end that we drafted, in round 5. Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Life Show. Happy Wednesday, everybody. I'm your host, Ian Hartitz. It is a great day to be great, and it's a great day to break down some of the single biggest questions ahead of what should be an eventful Week 11. But I cannot accomplish this on my own. Joining me, as always, on this lovely Wednesday morning, the one, the only, Dwain, the Rock McFarland. Chris is out doing some astronaut stuff, I believe, so we will see him soon. But Mr. Dwain, here we are. Only a couple more weeks till the fantasy playoffs get started. How are we feeling?
I always love whenever we're trying to figure out why Chris is, missing a show, and it's like, oh, he's meeting with the president's cabinet about the future of space. We're like, oh, okay. Well, I guess, that kind of takes priority over fantasy football. But yeah, I'm doing good, but we'll try to hold it down without Chris. It'll be hard without that big brain of the Cincy Storm Chaser.
The Cincy Storm Chaser, indeed. So miss you, Chris, and miss you, Shane Waldron. He is officially out as the Bears offensive coordinator. Dwain, it's actually broke during our show yesterday, but we've had a little bit of time to digest it. How confident are you feeling that now in the Thomas Brown era that Caleb Williams and company can get back on track?
I'm not super confident, but I think there are some easy buttons that this offense could start to push. It's always a question of, can they get these sort of things integrated into the offense? That's why a lot of times after the bye week, you'll see more of these things, but we didn't see them with the Bears. We consistently, when we talk about coordinators, what are the things that they can do before the snap or right at the snap that give their quarterback an advantage, right? Whether that be by their player getting the right mismatch we want, by identifying the coverage you're going to be playing, by having your player running at full speed, having linebackers have to worry about play action, all those sort of things that create space or a little bit of confusion for the defense, that help the quarterback, right? Help the wide receivers. And the Bears have not done those things this year, Ian. So there's room for improvement. Only 11% of their dropbacks have had play action. That's really bad. The NFL average is 15%, so 4 percentage points below the NFL average. And if you look at a lot of the best offenses in the league, like Detroit, 19% play action. Then you look at motion or shift at the snap, 37%. The league average is 50%. Look at the good offenses in the league. Atlanta, 65%. Houston, not as good right now because they've got injuries, but still 65% motion. The Rams, 74%. The Packers, 73%. The Chiefs, they have a lot of motion as well. And then if you look at the one other thing you can do, which is trick play looks, that's just giving the defense sort of an odd look they're not used to right before the snap. One last thing they have to diagnose that maybe creates that pause, just a little bit of hesitation. They hardly do that either. Only 5% of the time do they use a trick look play. The NFL average is 7%. So really not above average in any of those things. And so if you could just get to average, it probably would help. The one challenge, though, Ian, is going back and watching Caleb Williams. He just doesn't look good. He's not getting the ball out on time. He's holding the ball too long. He's trying to scramble around, make too many big plays versus those things are fine occasionally, but sometimes you just need to live within the structure of the play. And I think that Caleb Williams right now is really struggling to do that, which is why some of his wide receivers are so upset with him, even though you and I don't necessarily agree with Mr. DJ Moore.
Yeah, that was also the troubling kind of after report we had that apparently some Bears veterans are actually hoping that Tyson Bagent, a.k.a. T-Bag, gets the opportunity to replace Caleb under center. Dwain, I guess we can't say never because we're living in a world where Anthony Richardson, has been benched for a mediocre quarterback at this point and Joe Flacco. But man, that truly would be shocking. So obviously you got the lame duck coaching staff. We'll see what happens. But Caleb has played great for stretches of this season. Back-to-back weeks, week 5 and week 6, as the third best quarterback in EPA per dropback. I understand we don't get to play the Jaguars and Panthers every single week. But Dwain, I'm also kind of the impression that when players play really well, man, bad players don't do that regardless of even a good matchup.
Yeah, for sure. So I do think that he was a bit lifted by the matchups, but I think we've seen enough to know that it's there. It's somewhere in there for Caleb Williams, which that's a positive. Now you just got to figure out how do you bring that out of him on a more consistent basis. Obviously, there are other factors like the offensive line. And, hey, DJ Moore, how about you freaking run a route and finish a route? How about you not run off the field, because, when the play's not even over yet? Dude, this team is dedicated to you. They just paid you all this money. Stop being like that. I mean, I don't get it. Like that man should be a leader on the team, not this guy out here being a freaking complete crybaby. Give me a break, DJ Moore.
Tell us how you really feel, Dwain, but you are not wrong there. So again, collective problem. Caleb not excused, obviously. Plenty of off-target passes. The deep ball accuracy particularly has been rough. Also has allowed a league high 28.7% of his pressure dropbacks to turn into sacks. So yes, we have seen the second highest pressure rate over the course of the last 4 to 5 weeks behind only CJ Stroud. But again, not exactly making life easy with that. We also got DeAndre Swift with one of the league's worst, 3+ yards after contact rates. We have the wide receivers collectively averaging the 4th fewest yards per route run. Again, probably not going to all magically be fixed just because we got rid of Shane Waldron, but hopefully, Dwain, it does not hurt. Because, let's face it, things can't get much worse in Chicago. So there is a chance. We'll see. Green Bay coming into town, that would be a sad, poetic justice there. So we'll see what happens in Chicago. Yeah, sorry, Swinger. Resident Bears fan over Swinger. We haven't gotten that the Bears soundboard going in a while, Dwain. Just saying, producers not feeling great. But that was the main item of news yesterday. There are a few other, quick hitting things I want to go over. Starting off with Cowboys quarterback Dak Prescott officially undergoing season-ending hamstring surgery. So get ready for the Cooper Rush and Trey Lance experience the rest of the way. Cowboys also did sign Will Greer, so we'll see if he makes it onto the field. At running back, we do have Brian Robinson still practicing in a limited fashion as of Tuesday. Quoted though saying, "I think I have a great chance of playing ahead of Thursday night's matchup against the Eagles. We will see how that goes." Also note Chiefs running back Isaiah Pacheco has been designated to return from IR with his 21-day practice window to be opened, reportedly aiming for a late November return. And finally, Ian Rappaport has actually confirmed Miles Sanders not dealing with a major injury with that foot and ankle issue. Could miss a few weeks, but apparently not of the season-ending variety. We'll see if the Panthers try to extend him soon. Aaron Wilson reports that Nico Collins with that hamstring injury is expected to practice all week and make his return Monday night against the Cowboys. Please, for the love of the injury gods, do not mess this one up. Also, the Panthers activated Adam Thielen from IR with that hamstring issue, messing up some of my teams, Dwain, that have him on bye, but now I got to take him off the freaking IR because of this, so that's fantastic. Also, at tight end, Raiders tight end Michael Mayer returning to practice, hasn't played since week 3 due to personal reasons, so good stuff there. And finally, the 49ers signed their stud cornerback DeMondre Lenore to a 5-year, $92 million extension. Great day to be rich. So that was the news, everyone, and now a quick word to our friends over at DraftKings. A chill in the air, leaves falling to the ground, and football every weekend. That is what fall is all about. You can make each weekend even more exciting by getting into the action with our partners at DraftKings, the #1 place to bet on touchdowns. And right now, all new customers who bet $5 will instantly get $200 in bonus bets. All you have to do is download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and sign up using our promo code FantasyLife. The crown is yours. Again, that's $200 in bonus bets instantly. And you can stay in on the action. Use your $200 in bonus bets to bet anytime touchdowns on DraftKings. After all, DraftKings is the place to bet touchdowns. If sports betting is not yet available in your state, don't worry. You can still join in on all the fun with DraftKings Daily Fantasy and have the shot to win cash prizes. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now. New customers use our promo code FantasyLife and bet just $5 on any wager to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. That's promo code FantasyLife only at DraftKings Sportsbook. All right, Dwain, time to throw some shade or not. Going through some of the offenses where we have seen the biggest, there's something sticking in my glasses, excuse me, biggest increases in terms of their EPA per play from the first 5 weeks of the season compared to weeks 6 through 10. So really going to be going through, again, groups who for one reason or another, let's face it, in a lot of cases, improved quarterback play, have been playing their best football of the year as of late. So starting things off, Dwain, with the Miami Dolphins, the Tua effect has been clear. 31st in EPA per play during the first half of the season compared to 16th over the last 5 weeks. Are you buying that this is, again, the greatest show on turf?
Well, I'm buying that it's an improved offense because they have a quarterback that's capable of delivering the football to wide receivers and tight ends. They did not have that, with former, I think Pro Bowler Snoop Huntley. Is that right, Ian?
Oh, yeah.
I think I've heard that somewhere a few times. Yeah. So look, here's the thing. I am buying that it's better than it was, but this is not the offense that we've seen over the past 2 years. I mean, we're talking about a team that in 2022, Ian, averaged 8.9 yards per attempt passing, one of the most explosive attacks in the NFL. Then last year, 8.3. We're at 7.4 for Tua this season. So the big plays have just not been there. I have a little bit of a theory on this. I do feel like they're just trying to get the ball out of Tua's hands so quickly, which is why they've integrated Achane and Jonnu Smith into the offense even more. And we're not getting the big plays to Jalen Waddle. We're not getting the big plays to Tyreek Hill. Now, in the past, a lot of those weren't necessarily bombs down the field, right? They were creating space, and then those guys would use their yards after the catch to create the big plays. But defenses have also started to, I think, figure this offense out and figure out all the motion and different things that they're doing, all the window dressing. And so I think there's a few things going on. There's the adaptation to this offense by NFL defenses. And then there is the, Dolphins just trying to get the ball out of Tua's hands quicker. And that might be due to trying to protect him from getting another concussion. So, hey, Tua, don't go out there and try to tackle a dude on a pick. And let's get down a little sooner on some of those scrambles, still cutting it a little bit close for me.
Absolutely, man. And hey, even with all that, Tyreek still coming in as a top 12 wide receiver in our consensus ranks. Jalen Waddle has been the odd man out, though. Dwain's wide receiver 38 on the week. I'm right there with him as the wide receiver 35. Just incredible, Dwain. Now we're entering week 11 right now, and Jonnu Smith and Jalen Waddle have the same number of targets. Yeah. I mean, Jonnu Smith's only 20 yards behind the guy.
I know, man. I know. So here is the real test of what people think about this offense. Tell me if you would take these trades have happened in the last 12 hours in fantasy football. Would you trade Tyreek Hill for Chase Brown? That was a straight up trade yesterday.
Yeah, I didn't hesitate in my mind, honestly.
So you would go get Chase Brown or you would get Tyreek? Sorry, I'd
rather have Chase Brown.
I know. See, so this is where we're at. Like, we've clearly had to shift our expectations. So while it's a better offense having Tua out there, it's not the offense we once knew. And I think we have to adapt at this point. They could still explode down the stretch. Like, I would be willing to buy low on Tyreek Hill if I could. Like, he was traded for Aaron Jones. He was traded for Brock Bowers. So it is something like where you could go out and potentially kick it around in your league, but it's hard to offer up a really high-end asset for Tyreek right now. And people, people are starting to crack, man. People are getting rid of Tyreek.
Raiders and Patriots in Miami over these next 2 weeks should be a pair of wins. They'll at least be favored. 5-6 going to a Thanksgiving Day matchup against the Packers. So that could be a fun one. All right, Dwain, let's talk about another AFC team. The Los Angeles Chargers, they were just 25th in terms of EPA per play during the first 5 weeks of the season, but have risen all the way up to 13th over the last 5 weeks. So we've talked a lot about their passing game overall improving in terms of both efficiency and the volume. And now we do have some upcoming potential shootouts against the Bengals, Ravens, Falcons, Chiefs, and Buccaneers. Are you buying it, or, is it time to throw some shade?
I'm buying this. This is a balanced offense that has a good offensive line. They can beat you in a lot of different ways. They have young ascending wide receivers in Ladd McConkey as well as Quentin Johnston. Will Disley getting in on the party here lately, Mr. Hartitz. You've got two running backs playing well. Really, J.K. Dobbins, maybe the comeback player of the year. And then you've got Gus Edwards returning to the lineup. So I just think it's an offense that can beat you in a lot of ways. They don't make a lot of mistakes. 7.8 yards per attempt this year for Justin Herbert. That is a career high. So even though they brought down the pass attempts, they're winning through efficiency. Their defense is also playing good. So yeah, I'm buying this Chargers offense. I think it's one that could continue to get better. It's also one that could play really well into the playoffs, into the winter months, even though where they play at home, they don't have to worry about that. But this is a team, Ian, that even though they're a West Coast team playing a nice environment all the time over at SoFi, they can travel because they can really win in a lot of different ways. So yes, I am buying the Chargers for fantasy, for real life, for all of it. I like it.
Absolutely love the budding bromance. Not even budding. I mean, it's a full-on bromance now between Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert. Los Angeles Chargers social media team always done a great job and just one hilarious video after another. And Herbert, man, for my money's worth, has been playing like one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Did you see those moves he was making as a rusher, Dwain?
Yeah.
I know we've seen the rushing yards per game. It's not like we thought he was a statue, but my man was out there snapping ankles last week. I mean, it really was impressive. So Greg Roman leaning into his, QB design runs a little bit bit more. Truly has been great stuff from Herbert. I mean, if you can name 5 better real-life quarterbacks at this point, you are a better man than me. Talk about another AFC West squad, the Denver Broncos, Dwain, 26 in terms of EPA per play in the first 5 weeks, up to 19th over the last 5. So again, not exactly a juggernaut, but between Bo Nix knocking on that QB1 door, between Courtland Sutton, don't look now, scoring the 4th most PPR points at the position over the last month of action, even got Audric Estime seemingly taking over the backfield. Again, not saying we're looking at the 99 Rams here or anything, but at a minimum, Dwain, we have quite a few more, I guess, fantasy contributors out of Denver than we probably thought we would just a few short months ago.
Yeah, this one, I mean, I do think they're better, but I would throw some shade on this one. I don't know that this continues. I like what Bo Nix is doing, so this is not shade at Bo Nix in particular, but only averaging 6.1 yards per attempt. This is a major dink and dunk offense. Now, you can also look back at Sean Payton's offenses with Drew Brees, and they won with a dink and dunk approach. The thing was, it was a low ADOT, but it was not a low yards per attempt. They were getting more efficiency. And I don't know that that's all on Bo Nix, Ian. I think that this is a team that hasn't figured out who their playmakers are beyond Courtland Sutton. We got a 3-way rotation at tight end. Greg Dulcich, the one guy that might be able to stretch the field. He's not been active for like 4 game days in a row. We've got Troy Franklin, who fell in the NFL draft. He's trying to carve out a little bit of a role, hasn't really worked out that well. Devon Villay, I don't even know if I'm saying this name right. I know it's like Art Vandelay. I know we were saying this like a Seinfeld episode. I guess I should actually listen to how the man's name is said. I've heard it said, but I can't remember it. But like he took on a larger role last week. So they're trying to figure out, like, do they have another playmaker that could help come in behind Courtland Sutton? Because now that Sutton's really produced over these last few games, you and I know how it works. NFL defenses, they're coming in, they're mostly focusing on the last 3 to 4 games of film, right? And that's why we see some of these ebbs and flows of which players get the ball more throughout the season on these offenses, because defensive coordinators, they go back and they look at games further back, but they're really looking at like, hey, who's this Courtland Sutton guy? Well, you know how they do. They just call it the number. They don't even say the player's name. Hey, who's this? I don't know what Courtland Sutton's number is. 14. Who's this number 14 guy? We probably want to cover him, send some help coverage. So who's going to be the other player to step up? I think that's the big question. So I think this is still probably, a below average NFL offense, but it's still a positive for Bo Nix. Overall, they'll have to throw shade on the idea that it's suddenly going to be one of these offenses we want to be a part of in fantasy the rest of the way beyond Courtland Sutton.
Rushing upside for Bo Nix has probably been the biggest surprise here. Just in terms of his percentage of fantasy points from passing versus rushing, he's at the same distribution as Drake May and most impressively Kyler Murray this year. 32% of Bo Nix, again, fantasy points, all on the ground. So good stuff from the rookie. I know someone that a lot of people consider to reach at number 12, but I would say after 10 weeks of action, got to be pretty pleased if you are a Broncos fan. Let's talk about the New York Football Jets, Dwain. Not exactly thriving, but they have been technically fielding an above-average offense over the last 5 weeks. A lot more than they could have said during the first 5. So they get the Colts this week, then they have a bye, and then down the stretch, Seahawks, Dolphins, Jaguars, Rams, and Bills. So not every single one of those are layups, but man, I still don't think Rodgers is completely cooked, and even if their real-life playoff chances might be dead at this point, I do think given the condensed nature of this offense, Dwain, still a lot to be excited about here in New York.
Yeah, look, we love Garrett Wilson, and I still like Davante Adams. Like, I don't think Davante Adams is what he once was, but like Ian, to your point, like it is a very condensed offense. Whenever you look at Davante Adams over these first 4 games with Aaron Rodgers, it's pretty amazing. I mean, this man has a 31% target share. If you throw out the first game, right, which he basically arrived and just, walked off the bus. If we look at the last 3 games, he has a 35% target share. So I think from a fantasy perspective, I want to buy on Davante Adams. I had him in my risers section of the rankings last week, and that was a miss. I'm going back to the well this weekend, and he will be in the risers section again. I'm sorry. It's hard to be getting that many targets and not be able to come through. So as far as like this turning into like a juggernaut offense, I don't know, but I think that it is capable of being above average still. Aaron Rodgers, there are concerns. I mean, we're at a career low at this point, in yards per attempt. Like 6.7 was in 2015. Is at 6.4 right now. And it's been a steady decline. 2020, 8.2, 2021, 7.7, 2022, 6.8, obviously didn't play in 2023, and now he's at 6.4. So is he potentially losing something? Maybe. When I watch him throw the ball, I don't see it. Like, I feel like he makes all the throws, but there is something going on with Aaron Rodgers.
I think it's just really the lack of that high-end mobility that he used to have. I mean, you still see him from a clean pocket, getting the ball out on time. Yeah, he will make a couple throws per game that, again, look like the just past legendary version of himself. But, similar to Kirk Cousins, just doesn't exactly have the same wheels these days post-Achilles. So Father Time undefeated. But, yeah, Garrett Wilson, wide receiver 9, and Devontae Adams, wide receiver 14 in our consensus ranks, certainly still believing in those pass-catching talents. Last one, Dwain, we do have the Cleveland Browns freed from the Deshaun Watson experience. Jameis Winston has been there and making things happen, some bad, but also some good. And accordingly, they are the 5th biggest riser. So going to have a tough schedule stretch from weeks 12 to 15. They get the Steelers twice, the Broncos, and the Chiefs. But this Sunday, Dwain, revenge game for Jameis against the Saints. Oh my God, I cannot wait to hear what he says in the pregame huddle.
Yeah, I think we have to throw some shade on this one for the rest of the season. I do think that this is an okay matchup this weekend with Marshawn Lattimore no longer on that team. They still have a couple of quality cornerbacks, for the Saints, but their defense, it's average. It's not something that's going to hold down like really good offenses. Now, are the Browns a really good offense? Probably not, but Cedric Tillman has been really amazing. David Njoku is a really good player. Jerry Jeudy, Elijah Moore, they're mid, but I think this is another big week for Tillman coming up this week. But I do look at this for the rest of the season. I have concerns, and I know you've talked about it as well. Can you sell high on Cedric Tillman? Maybe you don't force that this weekend. I think he'll be a guy that'll be hard to keep out of probably the top 18 to 20 wide receivers in fantasy. But after that, it does get pretty tough, and I worry Jameis is going to come out here. Jameis only knows one way to live, and that is YOLO, and he's going to turn the ball over. And we know that coaches get so sick of turning the ball over, and so I think there's a decent chance that at some point they pull the plug on Jameis and want to take a look at Dorian Thompson-Robinson. If that happens, man, you're looking at like an Anthony Richardson-esque type passing attack where we'll be hoping they can complete 50% of their passes in a week, which is not good for anyone involved.
We don't even have to do the whole Anthony Richardson Colts thing. I think we're going to be looking like what the Browns offense looked like during the first 6-7 weeks of the season, unfortunately. So, hey, DTR, I know a lot of his numbers were from the rookie year. It is legal for players to get better as they get more experience. But, yeah, that same tough schedule certainly wouldn't be helping him out either. So, again, guys, those were the big-time risers: Dolphins, Chargers, Broncos, Jets, and Browns. For what it's worth, the Cowboys, Saints, Colts, Bengals, and Commanders have been the bottom 5 teams in terms of the drop-off. Wouldn't sweat the Commanders, more so just a facet of them being that freaking good. Number 1 in the first 5 weeks, still the 4th best offense in the league over the last 5. So great stuff there, and great stuff from our friends over at Knockaround. Our YouTubers can notice that we have been wearing their lovely sunglasses. I have Dub Bears frames on because, sometimes you got to throw a bone to such a depressing team right now. So shout out to the Bears and shout out again to Knockaround. You can see their full collection of sunglasses over at knockaround.com. Polarized lenses for less than $50. And guys, these truly are a high quality feature for a low price, which I love, Dwayne. I've spent big money on sunglasses before, but I want to wear them everywhere. And sometimes you have a couple too many Mike's Hard Lemonades at a pool party, and all of a sudden your expensive lenses are gone. Not that I want to lose my Knockarounds either, but again, really do appreciate the quality for the price and that UV 400 protection for your eyes. Gotta love that. So check out the officially licensed NFL collection and make sure to use code LIFE for free shipping on your Knockaround order. That was fun. Fraud check season, Dwayne. It's everyone's favorite segment. We go through some of the biggest performances from last week and determine if they were a fugazi, if they were a fraud, or maybe they're a sign of even bigger and better things to come. Starting off with a quarterback who was on top of every single waiver wire article after the first 2 weeks of the year. Yeah, didn't exactly crack the top 20 between then and last week, but Derek Carr, Dwayne, coming off a QB6 performance that honestly could have even been even bigger had Alvin Kamara caught that 56-yard touchdown there at the end of regulation. So yes, the wide receiver room's still all kinds of banged up, but offensive line's starting to get a little bit healthier. Are you buying the potential, Dwayne, for Derek Carr to, no, not rip off, another top 6 finish every single week the rest of the way, but potentially be someone that we can use, in deeper leagues again?
No, it's a fugazi. Fugazi big time, Ian. Look, we don't have any weapons. Chris Olave just went on IR. Not going to have him back for at least another 3 games if we get him back at all. So you got Marquez Valdez-Scantling as your number 1 wide receiver out here. Hat tip to MVS for doing MVS things, catching 3 balls, 2 of them for touchdowns last week. So, yeah, I'm not in on Derek Carr. Just not enough weapons. Don't trust the Saints offense, so I will pass on this one.
does have some reasonable matchups. Browns this week, then a bye week, and they get the Rams, Giants, Commanders, Packers, and Raiders to close things out. So again, wouldn't be shocked if we maybe get another boom, but yeah, going to have to be on more of the fraud side because again, just only so much you can do with that wide receiver room and the state it is. Let's talk about running back Dwain on a bye this week, but can't help but give him a little bit of love for the stretch he's been on. Rachaad White, since returning from injury, PPR RB2, RB14, RB4, and most recently RB5 finishes. Dwain, we talked about Kate Otten getting a lot of those, receptions left over from Chris Godwin, but, pretty tough to say that Rachaad White hasn't benefited in his own right. Do you see this persisting ahead of a really nice schedule following the Buccaneers Week 11 bye?
Well, we know the return of Mike Evans is going to steal a few of these looks, but still behind Otten and Evans, they don't really have anything else. So I think that the receiving role that we have here for Rachaad White really is like allowing him to do the thing he does best, Ian. They're using Bucky Irving more than Rachaad White on rushing attempts, but they're letting Rachaad White handle the passing down duties. He's got a 53% route participation rate over the last 3 games. That's really solid, but the bigger thing, 16% target share. So I could see that sustaining. I put his utilization score, which is at 7.2 over these last 3 games since we lost Chris Godwin, into the back end tools that we have to say, okay, what is the potential range of outcomes on a guy like Rachaad White? It was pretty good, Ian. A running back 2, 59% of the time. So 17 guys that we have in that sample over the last 4 years. But man, 29% of the time they've managed a low-end running back 1 finish. And then 12% of the time they've been a running back 3. So I think most likely you've got a solid running back 2 going forward. You could get lucky if he stays hot in the passing game and maybe even have a low-end running back 1. It's going to be hard. That's versus like historical numbers. We have like 4,000 running back 1s this year because we have guys getting so much of a workload. So again, that's versus history. But I would say even with all the guys that we've got are studs, he's a borderline running back 2 the rest of the way for me until we see him slow down.
Got to give Liam Cohen a lot of credit. As much as Rachaad White, we have given him his flowers over the years for being a good receiver back. You have seen some of these catches, again, just pretty much be walks in the park in terms of the ease of which he's picked up some of the yards. But hey, Dwain, style points don't count for anything extra in Fantasyland. And overall, 71% of White's production this year have come from just receiving elements of his game. That is higher than any other top 40 running back other than Christian McCaffrey. Obviously, just dealing with a 1-game sample there. So mention that schedule. After their bye, the Giants, the Panthers twice, the Raiders, Chargers, and Cowboys. So obviously don't want to face that Chargers defense, but otherwise wheels up for Rachaad White. And also I think Bucky Irving and this 2 running back condensed attack. Let's talk about Calvin Ridley, Dwain, the wide receiver 3. He's now finished as a top 4 option in 2 of the last 3 weeks with 2 separate quarterbacks under center. So yet another really good schedule here. Vikings, Texans, Commanders, Jaguars twice, Bengals, and Colts to finish out the season. Calvin Ridley, Dwain, maybe not a top 5 wide receiver the rest of the way, but would you be surprised if we look back at this kind of second half stretch and see him actually finish as a top 12 option?
Real quick, I think I said borderline running back 1 on Rachaad White. I meant borderline running back 2 the rest of the way, just to clarify. But yeah, Coward. On Calvin Ridley, yeah, big time coward. Call me a coward all you want. He is not a borderline running back 1. But yeah, Calvin Ridley, man, I think one of the big differences here, Ian, is like, we've talked about it all season long, like the air yards and everything have been there, but it was the catchable target rate was too low. Well, over these last 3 games, a couple of things have happened here. Well, number one, we've got DeAndre Hopkins gone, so that's opened up more targets. We got target shares of 38, 32, and 39% in these 3 games. 36% target share is going to be really good. The other thing they're doing is they're moving him around more on the formation, giving him some of these easier looks, not making him do everything down the field. The air yards are still really strong like they have been all year, but getting some of these easier looks, and then seeing Will Levis return and him actually being able to make it through that. Even though Will Levis, threw for 175 yards last weekend, we still had a wide receiver 3 finish out of Calvin Ridley. Now, over time, if Will Levis continues to do that, Ian, that's going to be a problem. But what I want to say is Will Levis, like his underlying data was better than 175 yards in that game. I think they did what they needed to, in the game, but I think he could have actually thrown for more yardage. So I think there is a little more upside than what I thought there would be with Ridley. So I think he's a borderline wide receiver 2 the rest of the way, but he does offer these major booms. I will say this is who Calvin Ridley has been for the last 2 years. He's going to be the wide receiver 3. Or he's going to be the wide receiver 45. I can't tell you which one he's going to be on the week, but hey, you've got to be pretty talented to have a chance to continually, bust into the top 10 wide receivers like every 2 or 3 weeks.
Again, probably not going to be ranking him as a wide receiver 1 or anything, but he is a consensus top 25 option from our team of quote unquote experts. My wide receiver 24, Dwain's wide receiver 20 ahead of week 11. Let's talk about someone else, Dwain, who was pretty much left for dead during the first part of the season, but don't look now, has 4 top 12 finishes in his last 5 games. Mark Andrews coming off an overall tight end 2 finish in week 10, starting to look a lot like that tight end that we drafted, in round 5, thinking it'd be a good thing just a few short months ago, Dwain.
Yeah, the challenge is this game came with Isaiah Likely out. So I think some of this comes down to will Likely play. I'm writing up Andrews in my rankings risers piece today, but he's in the section that's kind of pending more information. If we see that Isaiah Likely is not going to be playing again, Ian, I think he's a top 6 tight end this week, which is saying a lot because we're pretty crowded at the top of the tight end ranks. Suddenly. We went through a long drought to start the season, things looking much more robust here to finish. The other thing I will say with Andrews, though, is I went back and I got to watch most of it anyway because it was an island game. Just wanted to go back and kind of get my eyes on the last couple of games for him. I do think he is moving around better. It is a guy that was coming off that tightrope surgery that we saw hamper Tony Pollard last season. So I think there is a little bit of it's kind of a narrative thing. We don't know for sure, but I will say that he does look better, getting open, moving around. So that could have been part of it as well. But the big test will be when Isaiah Likely is back, what is his route participation? If it's 75, 80%, in this Ravens offense where Lamar Jackson out here dealing for 280 yards a game over the last month, that's going to be really good for fantasy football. But if Likely comes back and turns it into a 50-50 split, then really he's just kind of a boom bust high-end tight end too.
Lamar Jackson, number 1 in the NFL in terms of fantasy points, just from passing production. Not bad for, a running back, as a lot of idiots would say out there. So Mark Andrews, also number 1 in terms of ESPN's open rate. Now, Ravens as a whole just seem to really be going high on the separation scores, which, hey, I do think they have some good pass catchers. Maybe has a little bit to do with Todd Monken's awesome play designs. But regardless, he is looking good. I am with you, Dwain. And accordingly, my tight end 5 on the week. That is assuming Isaiah Likely is out. But yeah, man, if we do see Likely out again with that hamstring issue, only guys I would start ahead of Mark Andrews, George Kittle, Travis Kelce, Brock Bowers, and David Njoku. So I could see sliding TJ Hawkinson into that, but for sure, give me Andrews ahead of Evan Ingram, Sam Laporta, Mike Gesicki, Kyle Pitts, amongst others. So that was our fraud check, everybody. But now it's time to get into some nitty gritty Week 11 smash matchups. Ooh. Nice little slip by that boxer in our lovely YouTube graphic right there. Smash matchup season. If you guys follow me on Twitter, you'll see these matchup charts I send out each and every week. Basically, guys, just combining different metrics for the offense and defense, trying to get away from the always, offense ranks Y, defense ranks X, combining those numbers and getting one-way metrics to help point out who has the good matchups and explosive plays, pressure, passing yards per dropback, rushing yards before contact, and EPA. So we're going to start off with some explosive plays, Dwain, primarily on the ground because don't look now, but Jonathan Taylor may be set up to absolutely smash against a Jets defense that really has had some trouble slowing down the run in recent weeks.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of things to like about Jonathan Taylor. Number 1 is workload. Ian, over these last 3 games, dude has an 81% rush share. So since we've had Anthony Richardson lead the picture, it's pretty much just been Jonathan Taylor. Also has a nice role in the passing game, 58% route participation over these last 3 games. So, I mean, that's elite stuff for running back utilization. And then you talked about the explosive plays, and that's really bled over into, what the Jets are doing on defense as far as yards given up on the ground per game this year. 134, that's the 6th most on this slate for week 11. So yeah, I think those are nice things. The thing that keeps JT from being a smash matchup for me is it's still a 20-point team total for the Colts. So typically anybody that I put in smash, they have to hit the metrics that we just talked about. You got to have good utilization. You got to have, a team that's given up a lot of yards, but I also want a higher team total where I know that there's a bigger opportunity to score a lot of touchdowns. They're also 4-point dogs. So I think that is the one challenge this weekend. They're underdogs and we have a lower team total, but I do think obviously if you've got JT, you're starting him. And I do agree that there is a chance for him to completely go off. Would it surprise me if he's the running back 1 overall? No, that wouldn't surprise me. He just doesn't check all the boxes I use for a smash matchup.
I hear you, man. I was putting my rankings together last night. I settled with JT as RB8, which is the highest of our rankers, but I had him initially like RB4 or RB5, and I just couldn't do it. Dwayne had to push some other guys up. It could happen, but again, not having that pass down role, the lack of touchdown upside, all good points. But at least at a minimum, though, that run game efficiency should be there. Jets have allowed 145 plus rushing yards in 4 of their last 5 games. Like, my God, you give JT some of those big holes that we saw Joe Mixon running through a couple weeks ago. Gonna be a nice performance there for the Colts RB1. Talk about the Texans overall offense going up against the Cowboys. Dwain has the 3rd best combined explosive pass play rate this week, also hitting above average against the run. So yes, I am a little bit concerned that the return of Micah Parsons will really help, take advantage of what's been a flimsy Texans offensive line. But at the same time, man, Nico Collins is back, and wouldn't be the most shocking thing, Dwayne, to accordingly see, one of the NFL's best wide receivers help get this offense back to looking like the group that we know they're capable of being.
Well, I do love Joe Mixon this week. That's for sure. You've got a 25-point team total. You've got the Cowboys giving up 137 yards per game on the ground. You're 8-point favorites over the Cowboys. Man, and then you look at Joe Mixon, you look at his utilization, Ian, just guess. What do you think his share of the team's rushing attempts are over the last 4 games? Go higher than whatever's in your mind.
95%.
Well, it's 87. That's insane. Okay. You never see a running back getting 87% of the carries. Guys, 65% is good. 70% is elite. To be at 87%, I don't know. Can Joe Mixon keep doing this every single week? I'm not sure, but they're letting him do it right now. He is coming off the field a little bit in pass downs, but man, they still target him. He's got a 12% target share over the last 4 games. So you could make an argument that Joe Mixon should be running back 1 overall in the ranks. So Joe Mixon is an absolute freaking smash this weekend. And looking forward to seeing Nico Collins back. I don't know how much the Texans will have to pass, and they should want to protect C.J. Stroud from the pressure, but I think it only takes a couple of plays for Nico to get there against this secondary. I could see him cooking Trayvon, just one of those nice little patented Nico double moves. Hit him on a couple of slants early, then give him the sluggo late, and Trayvon's going to be going for that pick with the Cowboys trailing. That could be 80-yard house call.
Dude, we saw it last week. I'm trying to see who it was. Israel Mukamu, I think, the dude with dreads outside. Not Stephon Gilmore anymore, but the Eagles were just attacking him, man, play after play. And let's face it, having a lot of success doing that. So, again, good stuff for Nico. Hopefully Tank Dell can get going again. Hopefully all this leads to CJ Stroud actually putting up some good numbers, Dwayne, because, again, it's one of these things where I do think the problems for Stroud have been more to do with the offensive line and losing his pass catchers. I'm not saying the dude's a flop all of a sudden. But in fantasy land, man, QB 14 or worse in 6 straight games. So we both have him as top 13 options at the position this week. Again, this cake matchup is a big reason why. Let's talk about Tua Tagovailoa. I mentioned again the Dolphins as one of the biggest rising offenses over the past 5 weeks. Now set up quite well against the Raiders. So looking at combined pressure rate, no QB is expecting to have cleaner pockets than Tua. So Dwayne, part of this is what you mentioned before in terms of him getting the ball out quick and trying to avoid those hits, which I do not hate. But we also do have a Raiders defense that, let's face it, not exactly the world's greatest secondary either. So could you see Tua booming coming off of 3 performances as the QB 18 or worse?
Yeah, I think you could see it. I mean, he has got the 4th highest team total as of today on the slate at 26.3 points. And guys, the way we get that number, we just look at the total, the over-under number from Vegas, and then we subtract or we split, right, the spread, right? And so 26.3, that's really good. Like the best on the week is Jared Goff against the Jaguars at a 31. They have a 31-point team total. I just now I'm noticing this. I'm like, dear God, that's a lot. Brock Purdy's next with 29, but 26.3 is really good for Tua. So yeah, I think this is going to be a matchup where really Ian, the Dolphins should be able to move the ball whatever way they choose. Right? Whether that's on the ground, whether that's through the air, they've been more of a balanced team, but I think we could see some of the big plays that have been missing thanks to a clean pocket. Maybe Tua feels comfortable holding onto that ball just a tad longer, letting some of these plays downfield develop, and that could be big for Tyreek Hill as well as Jalen Waddle.
Now, obviously talking about the passing game here, but we know they like to keep their running backs involved as well. Yep. What do you make of that mini, utilization shift we saw between Jalen Wright and Raheem Mostert, Dwayne? I mean, Mostert 0 carries last week, was being used on 3rd downs, which is a fantasy-friendly feature. But let's say again, don't want to wish injuries. Devon Achane wins the lottery tomorrow and says, you know what, I'm taking the rest of the year off. I'm going to go to Cancun with my family. Awesome for you, Achane. If it was between Mostert and Jalen Wright, do you think that week 10 evidence would be enough to actually prefer Wright at this point?
I think it could. So here's what I think has happened. Achane is the 1A. He had a 70% snap share last week, 68% the week before. And the big shift that we're not talking about, Achane took 57% of the rushing attempts. He had been at 40% in 3 healthy games with him and Mostert. So he moved into the lead role. And then they decided to split the remaining work with Raheem Mostert as well as Jalen Wright, who you just mentioned, with Raheem Mostert taking the passing down work that didn't go to Achane, and with Jalen Wright taking the rushing workload that did not go to Achane. So we'll see if it sticks, but I think that Jalen Wright is certainly someone that, Ian, you want to have on your bench in deeper leagues. He has that explosive playmaking ability. Now, it hasn't quite been there for the Dolphins' run game like we've seen in the past, just kind of like the passing game. Overall, this entire offense, the efficiency's down, even with Tua back. But man, Jalen Wright, if this offense were to suddenly get right and he was getting, say, 50% of the rushing attempts, we would be talking about a guy that would have major running back one upside.
And really do keep an eye on those kind of handcuff running backs on your waiver wires, guys, because there are some rough bye weeks coming up. Some of those circles and hoops I had to jump through in my crappy 8-man home league, man, freaking Bills and, Saints and all these Bengals players on bye next week. You got to unfortunately cut ties with some of these handcuffs. So I would just say Tyler Algier right now rostered in 50% of ESPN leagues. Remember, he's one injury away from having a huge role. Tajay Spears, someone that's more in the know right now, but still only rostered in 45%. Braylon Allen down there at 21%. Ray Davis, 18%. Trey Benson, 16% on bye right now. Same with Blake Corum at 16%. And Jalen Wright all the way down there at just 5.5%. So again, not saying we'd be dealing with a top 10 running back if anything happened to Achane, but given that utilization shift, and just given that, in my opinion, man, running the football especially, you can argue Wright's look like the best running back in Miami all season, even above Achane, at least running the football. Good, got to have, stashed if you can afford to do it. Let's talk about another running back, Dwain, seemingly set up to smash for the first time this year. Nick Chubb going up against the Saints. Now, we haven't seen exactly the world's best offensive line in Cleveland, and accordingly, we've only seen Chubb average 2.7 yards per carry, and admittedly tough matchups against the Bengals, Ravens, and Chargers. But when you do look at the combined rush yards before contact this week, the Saints are a defense that we should feel pretty good about attacking.
Yeah, the Saints give up 141 yards per game on the ground. That is one of the best matchups this weekend on the slate. You got the Browns coming out of a bye week. We just talked about J-Mo wanting to live YOLO. I can't help but think that, like the Browns, a good adjustment to make would be trying to run the ball more. And Nick Chubb has really been the guy, Ian, that has been leading the way. You pointed out he hasn't been great from an efficiency standpoint, but he's only had 3 games back from the injury. But man, 70 and 75% of the team's rushing attempts over the last 2 games. So the workload could definitely be there. He's a guy that I'm riding up. I've got him in my rankings risers for this week, so I'm with you on this one. Not a great team total, but still a close spread, right? They're only 2-point dogs, against the Saints. So I do think this is a spot where we could see Nick Chubb come out, get 70, 80 total yards, but punch in a touchdown. I know that's not like, oh my God, we're going to see, a running back 1 performance, but I think he could be in the running back 2 conversation for sure this week.
My RB20, your RB25, so we're pretty much on the same page there. I have him ranked ahead of guys like Tony Pollard. It's just a situation where Tajay Spears is healthy, Pollard's banged up. Najee Harris, really tough matchup there against the Ravens. Austin Eckler, assuming Brian Robinson is back. Travis Etienne, Rico Dowdle, guys in offenses that we are not big fans of at this point. So you have Chubb, Dwain, as more of an upgrade, or is he getting the always just awesome sicko start tag this week?
He is the sicko start. I don't want to having to give it away. But yeah, I've already put him in the outline. Swing gets the outline after this show's over. I've already written the outline. Trying to get done early. Got to go see Zoe play some golf today, Ian. She got first place last time. So we'll see if she can keep it going.
Shout out Zoe. Someone in the McFarland family has to be winning stuff. You know how it goes.
That's
Dwain.
Right.
All right.
Because it's not me.
Lions passing game coming for those Jacksonville Jaguars. Yes, Jared Goff threw 5 picks on Sunday night, but I will say, go back and watch those guys. Really, all 3 of them in the first half. We had a Hail Mary. We had one that was more or less a strip sack. And then we had the first one, which was a deflected pass in the flat to Jahmyr Gibbs. So again, you throwing 5 interceptions. It's not good. The other 2 I thought were definitely Goff's fault, but also not exactly thinking that this Lions offense is suddenly incapable of moving the football. So accordingly, Dwain, we do have Jared Goff as a top 12 quarterback this week. Do you think that guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jameson Williams, and Sam Laporta can also take advantage of this cozy matchup?
Yes, I do. I mean, they have a 31-point team total. That's astronomical. You're looking at the Jaguars giving up 274 yards per game through the air. That's the second best matchup on the slate this weekend. All those things you just talked about. They give up 35 points per game to opposing pass catchers in PPR leagues. So Amon-Ra St. Brown is my wide receiver 1 this weekend. Like, you've got some tougher matchups against some of our best wide receivers at the top of our ranks. Like, we're not moving a guy like Jamar Chase out of, like, the top 10 because, he's got a tough matchup, but he moves down a couple spots. Amon-Ra St. Brown moves up a couple spots. So that's how he ends up as my wide receiver 1 for the week. We'll have to wait and see. Can Laporta play this weekend? He got knocked out in the end of that game with a shoulder, and it's a real shame, Ian. Like, man, he was having his best game of the year. Like, he was getting targeted downfield. They were giving him the underneath looks, had a nice target share going. It was finally looking like maybe we were going to get the real Laporta back. Then he got hurt at the end of that. I think the other name here is Jameson Williams. He hit the target earning, hasn't stuck, but we know the dude is a big play waiting to happen. And I think you're getting at least one big play against this Jaguar secondary.
I'm with you, man. That's why I'm higher than the rest of the rankers on JMO. My wide receiver 25 on the week. I mean, when we look at Jameson versus guys like Jalen Waddle, like Jerry Jeudy, DJ Moore, Romeo Doubs, Amari Cooper, amongst others. I mean, give me JMO, man, because he walked right back into an every down role following the suspension. No issues there. The Jags ranked dead last in EPA allowed per drop back. And if we are going to be missing Sam Laporta, who do you think those design deep shots that Ben Johnson loves to draw up are going to? It will be his speedy number 2 wide receiver. So I know it's been a little bit since we've seen that boom from JMO, but have seen far more good than bad out of him this year. Don't want to completely give away the rest of our content over these next few days, Dwain, but I think I might be shouting out JMO for our bull calls here on a Friday. All right, let's talk about now some combined EPA goodness. I found this to be pretty useful when you're trying to bet overs and unders specifically. Again, just trying to get a good feel for which offenses are, facing bad defenses and what matchups accordingly could turn into fantasy-friendly shootouts. Starting off with a Ravens-Steelers matchup, Dwain. Several really good matchups this week as a whole, but this one might take the cake. Maybe not going to be that 2008, 2009 defensive slugfest version, though, because don't look now, but the Ravens and, yes, even the Russell Wilson-led Steelers, both doing really good things on offense this year.
Well, we love all Ravens every week, no matter what. So we don't really have to say anything about them. But this is a big boost for the Steelers this week. You're playing against the worst secondary. It's crazy to say, the worst secondary in the NFL. I remember a time not too long ago, last year, where we had a really good secondary with the Ravens, and they've always invested, and they've done a nice job there. It's just not worked out this season. So, yeah, looking at Russell Wilson coming out here and balling out, man, over these last several games. I know he didn't get the huge yardage total last weekend, Ian, but still tossed 3 touchdown passes. So, Russ is just continuing to ball. Now he gets to play against this Ravens secondary. You got George Pickens really emerging. Again, don't want to give away all the content over the next few days, but it is a smash matchup for this passing attack for the Steelers.
I mean, I'm looking at the ranks right now, which you guys can as well on FantasyLife.com. Both Dwain and I have George Pickens as our wide receiver 7. Disappointing. I thought I was going to get you beat on that one, but you really are high on the guy. Only wide receivers that Dwain has ranked higher are our one true sun god, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Nico Collins, A.J. Brown, and Garrett Wilson. That is it. So again, George Pickens certainly proving to be a great fit for those Russell Wilson moonballs, and just especially, man, in a matchup that should force Pittsburgh to have to throw the ball more, both because they got to keep up with Lamar and company, and because that Ravens front 7 does remain very good at stopping the run. Really, again, going to be tough to find some lineups that George Pickens should not be starting in ahead of this week. So also feeling good on the Baltimore side as always. At what point, Dwain, are you starting to maybe get behind Rachaad Bateman a little bit more? Because I mean, Deontay Johnson, we even heard Mike Tomlin say it himself, man, not exactly someone who's been featured. I know it's only been a couple games, but Rachaad Bateman, man, my wide receiver 40 on the week. One more big game away from maybe creeping into wide receiver 3 territory, perhaps.
Yeah, you probably can't get much for him if you were to try to sell. I would try to sell because really any kind of expansion of role for Deontay Johnson is going to hurt him. So But for this week, I did rank him higher than where I had him last week. I'm basically at a show me kind of spot now with Deontay Johnson. Until we see his role actually expand, I'm going to keep Rachaad Bateman as the assumed wide receiver 2 in this offense. And because it is so good, yeah, I mean, that gives you essential boom bust potential every week. I mean, honestly, like if we're being really fair to Rachaad Bateman, Ian, we could argue he's had a similar season to Jameson Williams, who we just talked about. Yeah. Not quite the same levels, but in a very similar role, also in a really good offense, honestly throwing for more yards per game than what we're getting from the Lions. So yeah, I do think if Rachaad Bateman can hang on to the role, then I think, maybe we've just got to start treating him more as that, I don't know, boom bust wide receiver 3, same range as JMO. I am a little concerned that like at some point we see more Deontay Johnson.
Fair point, as always, my friend. All right, last one, guys. Another just Thursday night matchup that looks fantastic. We were getting spoiled recently. Is the Commanders going up against the Eagles? So, mentioned before how the Commanders' offense has fallen off a little bit during the second half, but don't get that confused with them being bad all of a sudden, just closer to the 5th best offense in the league as opposed to number 1. Meanwhile, the Eagles have been absolutely on fire, really on both sides of the football, man. And I do want to focus on the defense maybe a little bit, Dwain, because this was a group where we knew they had the dogs in the front 7, Jalen Carter, all those, literal Georgia Bulldogs, I should say, that were flying around down there. But man, some added have just helped this defense take their game to another level. 17 or fewer points allowed on defense in each of the last 5 weeks. No offense has broken more than 200 total yards. So I know they haven't faced the Commanders, but man, Dwain, if you do look at who could be the potential biggest, most complete challenger to the Detroit Lions in the NFC, which is still just a wild thing to say out loud, with all due respect, the 49ers getting healthy, man, I think it might be the Eagles.
Yeah, the Eagles are looking really good, and the defense is the major storyline. Obviously, Jalen Hurts doing his thing, scoring the rushing touchdown. Saquon's been great. We really haven't had to have a lot from A.J. Brown because, they've been in these cushy leads. It's honestly hurt the wide receivers. So much running happening right now for the Eagles, who I believe right now ranks 2nd in yards per game rushing. But if you look at their defense and you look at the matchup this weekend for Jaden Daniels specifically, it's pretty tough, Ian. I mean, 173 yards per game through the air is what the Eagles are allowing. That is the 2nd fewest on this slate, so it's going to be a tough one for Mr. Jaden Daniels. Touchdowns per game, only 0.8. Not even giving up 1 touchdown passing per game right now for the Eagles secondary. That is the 2nd toughest matchup on this slate. Only Joe Flacco for the Colts facing the Jets has a tougher matchup than that. So Jaden Daniels, though, Ian, you look at the point total, you look at the game, it's still hard to move him down because he rushes the ball and he does all the other things we love. So I got him as my QB3 this week. I think you could make an argument, honestly, that he could be as low as 5 below Josh Allen and Brock Purdy. Brock Purdy's just been dealing. You could maybe even say Joe Burrow, but I didn't have the stomach for it. I was like, man, he's a dual threat quarterback. I can't get him out of the top 3.
Even coming off the, relative dud for him against the Steelers, man, there were a lot of drop passes in that one, specifically that touchdown Diami Brown and several other that, again, could have been chunks and I think just helped that overall box score and what was a really tough matchup anyway. So, again, I invite you guys to check out the full matchup charts and breakdown in my weekly Fantasy Football Manifesto article. But before we get out of here, Dwain, did want to give a little bit of love to DSTs, as we all know, the onesie position that maybe not all of you have in your leagues, but if you do, always good to get ahead of this so you don't have to deal with it each and every week. And this will be useful, Dwain, so I'm about to go to the gym after this and go ahead and start going through all of our lineups. I know we got to be replacing the Chargers here on pretty much all of our teams. So looking ahead, okay, I think this is probably the ideal strategy if you are trying to get your DSTs rostered for the upcoming weeks. If you can lock down the Texans or the Lions over these next 3 weeks, that is ideal. Houston gets the Cowboys, Titans, and Jaguars from weeks 11 through 13. The Lions get the Jaguars, Colts, and Bears over these next 3 weeks. If they are not available, though, check out the Dolphins, who get the Raiders and Patriots, or the Vikings, who have been good already this year, less likely to be available. That said, getting Will Levis and Caleb Williams over these next 2 weeks. So I think that's pretty clear. Where it's a little bit more interesting, Dwain, is the playoff stretch, okay? Weeks 14 through 17. This is where we do have some clear, really good schedules. That said, we're not getting that happy marriage between awesome real-life defenses with elite matchups. So So the top 5 schedules in terms of the average, just rank in terms of fantasy points allowed by the DSTs: Jaguars, Colts, Bengals, Buccaneers, and the Cardinals. So Dwain, based on those groups, again, I wouldn't call any of them exactly good real life defenses, but at a minimum, Cincy, Tampa Bay, and Arizona figure to be heavily in contention for the playoffs. And especially in Arizona's case, I think we actually have seen some strides made on defense. So in those groups, Cincy gets the Cowboys, Titans, Browns, and Broncos over the last 4 weeks. Tampa Bay gets the Raiders, Chargers, Cowboys, and Panthers. The Cardinals get the Seahawks, Patriots, Panthers, and Rams. Does that make sense to you, Dwain, going with those 3 again over the Jaguars and Colts?
Yeah, I want to go with those 3. And the other thing I think people have to make a decision around, like you mentioned the Chargers, that's a great example. But against some of those borderline calls, I will just stay with the defense that's actually been good, even over the team, even over taking a team where we're just like, we don't like them. It's the Jaguars, but they have a schedule. I don't do that. I just stick with a defense like the Chargers on a team that I know can run the ball, control, and they can build a lead, all those sort of things. So there's a lot of things that you got to think through. I love the ones that you mentioned up top, and I do mostly focus, honestly, on defense just over the next few games, because you know how much injuries can reshape what defenses look like. But I love the call out there around the Detroit Lions. And who was the other one that you mentioned? That was the Texans. Those two do. Yeah. The Texans I tried to grab. I ran through half of our teams last night. I tried to grab the Texans anywhere they were available. I didn't see the Lions very often. Otherwise, on some of those teams, I just held the Chargers.
Really has been impressive seeing the Lions keep on keeping on without the services of Aiden Hutchinson. Number 1 in habit rate this season, guys. That's the percentage of plays where defense gets a pressure, interception, forced fumble, TFL, things that, do cause havoc. So again, you can check out all that in my Fantasy Football Manifesto. Also check out Dwain's award-winning, critically acclaimed utilization report, amongst many other fantastic things we have at FantasyLife.com. So appreciate you guys tuning in as always. And Dwain, myself, and the great Matthew Freeman, we'll be back tomorrow in our rankings episode of the week. So for Dwain, for producer Matt, for producer Kelsey, I'm Ian. Thanks again for tuning into the Fantasy Life Show. And until next time, take care, everybody.